They used to say finding the needles in the haystack. Not only are we going to find more needles, but we are actually going to point you to the haystack where there are most needles.
I'm Rich Frazier.
And I'm Russ Fanoff.
Welcome to the Nonprofit Fundraising Exchange, a podcast from IPM Advancement.
We believe strong nonprofits can change the world, and our goal with each episode is to bring you insightful conversations with thought leaders from the nonprofit sector.
Let's dive in. Hey, welcome back, listeners, to the Nonprofit Fundraising Exchange. I'm Rich Frazier.
And I'm Russ Fanoff.
Hey, Russ. We're here. We're in the future.
We are.
One step closer to the rise of the machines. And I, for one, am glad that I've cultivated a kind relationship with Alexa and British male Siri.
Yes.
Now that artificial intelligence is part of our culture, there's no putting the genie back in the bottle. How do we use it? Truly as a personal assistant, or just kick back and let AI do all the work?
Ooh, I like that last one. But those are all great questions, and we're going to tackle them today because, AI tools have made some parts of our jobs easier.
Mm-hmm.
But what we're going to talk about today, we're going to deep dive. We're going to have two great guests to talk about how these new tools can help with nonprofit fundraising.
Now, ChatGPT is probably the AI tool that listeners are most familiar with. But our guests today have lots more to share, and we're going to talk about AI tools that can analyze donor data, predict giving likelihood, and automate parts of the grant writing process, and even more. So, Russ, who are we talking to today?
Joining us today are Shereese Floyd, CEO of Witness My Life, and Ashutosh Nandeshwar, Senior VP of Data Science and Analytics at CCS Fundraising. Shereese, you've been on the podcast before. Thanks for coming back. And welcome, Ashutosh. We're very happy you could join us. We're excited to hear what you both have to share today. Would you please introduce yourselves to our listeners and tell them a little bit about your background, especially as it relates to AI and nonprofit fundraising? Shereese, why don't you go first?
Yeah, thank you, Russ. I'm really excited to be back again. I love the segment. Love all things that you do here.
Thank you.
I am Shereese Floyd, CEO of Witness My Life, and I am also the founder of AI Consultants for Nonprofits. I've been in nonprofit for over 20 years in marketing, helping organizations raise money with story-based marketing. Always been good with tech as well. Started out in running Facebook ads for digital campaigns, and AI was just the next iteration of tech. And so just using it personally, but then started to see the benefit of it in the nonprofit arena.
Wonderful. Well, great to have you back. Thanks so much for coming. And Ashutosh, please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your background.
Thanks, Russ. Thanks for having me. My name is Ashutosh Nandeshwar. I oversee currently CCS Fundraising's data science practice area. CCS Fundraising is one of the largest nonprofit fundraising consulting companies. Before joining CCS, I have led and built data science teams at world's leading higher education institutions. And before that, I was in grad school studying machine learning. I wanted to study robotics, but I couldn't cut that. So the next best thing was machine learning and training some of these AI models.
Excellent. Well, wonderful.
So, Shereese and Ashutosh, thank you very much for joining us. Now, we touched a little on this in the intro, but I want to start by asking you both to give us an overview. What are some of the challenges that AI can currently help with when it comes to nonprofit fundraising? And Shereese, I'm going to look to you first.
Okay, I often ask nonprofits when I'm working with them to think of AI as their newest team member, because when it is trained properly, it can sit in the gap where there is a bit of a lack of capacity. So it can help with capacity building. And so if you don't have a grant writer on staff, but you need to write grants, you can train AI to be able to do that. Now, a human is going to have to be able to run it, but you can get AI to be able to write the grant, at least 80% of it, and then a human is going to have to edit it and make it, sound like a human wrote it.
What are your thoughts, Ashutosh?
Yeah, I like to break AI into two different sections. One is maybe it's funny to say that out loud, but we can consider that as traditional AI, which encompasses machine learning, neural networks, the basis of modern AI, which is what Shereese was describing, the chat GPTs of the world, Stable Diffusions or Midjourney or Bard or Cloud. But there are two, so I like Shereese's take on this also. My background has been helping larger nonprofits. So they are usually well-resourced, but they also have lots of data that you can try to uncover some patterns and try to identify who your next major giving donors, what do they look like and where would they come from? And then you can apply some of these traditional AI techniques to uncover that opportunity. So I have spent a lot of time there, but as Shereese described, the modern AI tool set also can help nonprofits and individuals become more efficient and become faster. And I always like to use my Roomba as an example. I know we like to make fun of our Roomba. It's like what Shereese said. It can do 60 to 70% of the job, but you still have to pick it up because it cannot find its charging station. So you have to keep moving it.
That's a good analogy.
That is a great analogy. You might be able to use AI and push it to 80% of what you really need, but it really does lack that nuance. It lacks that human touch. And I'm not sure we'd ever want to get rid of that, right? The person would have to be, there'd have to be someone at the controls to really make sure it's not just kind of spitting out a very logical kind of constructed answer to whatever you're asking.
Right.
What can't AI do right now? What do you really want to kind of avoid using in the realm of AI? Maybe what's not ready yet? What's in your mind kind of off limits right now for nonprofit fundraising?
Yeah, I've been researching this for some time, and you always thought, oh, it cannot do this. But then now it can do that. So it's going to rapidly evolve, especially with programming. Of course, we all know that it's trying to predict the next word. So when it comes to programming and code, it's going to make lots of mistakes. But with new advancements that OpenAI has made with Code Interpreter, it can also generate the code, execute the code, and if it makes errors, if it hallucinates, as they like to call it, it will correct itself. So the gap is closing really fast in terms of what it cannot do. But I think that your points about the creative sides are still valid, that it may not be as creative.
So, Ashutosh, I'm interested in the data side of this. How could AI help nonprofits analyze and make sense of the data that they collect from donors and supporters and campaigns?
There are multiple ways it can help. Again, as long as you have enough data collected. If you don't have a whole lot of data collected, then of course you cannot do anything with it. But say that you're a nonprofit with 10,000 donors records, then you can think about what all sorts of information you could have on them. Of course, you would have the giving transaction history, how much they have given, when they have given, which areas have they given. So you start to tease out some insights, some patterns from that. So you can say, maybe, yes, Curtis is interested in giving to this specific designation at our nonprofit. Then you can maybe find people who are similar, donors who are similar to Curtis, and maybe now you can come up with your events programming, or maybe your annual giving appeals that are directed towards that segment. So the marketing segmentation is a very, I think, an easy entry point for lots of nonprofits to create segments of their donors and not treat everybody as the same.
Now,
and you can, of course, yeah, go ahead.
Well, I'm sorry to interrupt, but for somebody who's listening and kind of curious, well, how do I do that? How do I get into that? Is that part of your traditional AI, as you were describing before, or is that an automated AI? Did I say that correctly?
Yeah, traditional and modern. There are, to your question about where people can go. So that gap is closing so fast that even with just yesterday, I read this paper that Netflix and University of San Diego used the conversations from Reddit, where if you were to ask someone a question, hey, I watched this movie, which other movie do you think I should watch? So Netflix has obviously spent a lot of money into crafting their algorithms, making their algorithms really good. But now they are using this modern AI to use these conversations from Reddit to predict which other movies you may like. If you like Shawshank Redemption, here are 5 movies using the large language models, which is just fascinating. So there are some ways that even the modern AI will help you create segments. But if you wanted to use traditional AI methods, then you can use tools such as SPSS Enterprise Miner or SPSS Jump. And then there are some open source programming software also, R and Python, two of them.
I'm speaking to our producer, Curtis Schmidt, right now. I have a feeling there's going to be a lot of links on this episode. Yeah? I'm getting the thumbs up.
So that's really helpful information in terms of the broader kind of data set way of looking at AI and how it can help an organization. But as we know, a lot of nonprofits, the majority of nonprofits are rather small. So as I kind of implement AI with some of our clients that are smaller, I do look at it as an opportunity to kind of tweak personalization and donor engagement. Shereese, how do you look at working with nonprofit clients and nonprofits in general on that topic of something that's accessible? It's something that they could use without hiring a programmer or knowing a lot about data science. And how do you see that kind of working right now?
Yeah, when we're talking about what I have now learned, that's termed modern AI. I love it. Okay. So when we're talking about now the modern AI and personalization, there are usually two tools that I recommend that nonprofits start with. Now, all of them being very small, everybody wants to do things for free, and not everything can be free, but these are nominal prices. So yes, you can use ChatGPT for free, but the ChatGPT that has the plugins for $20 a month allows you to do a lot more in terms of helping to get things personalized. So with ChatGPT and with Zapier, you can really truly personalize and automate a lot of these functions that are, someone is manually doing over and over and over. And so integrating the two, for instance, you can have it program it so that if you receive an email with a certain word or certain amount of words or whatever it is, keywords that you're looking for, it'll go into ChatGPT and then write the response for you. Or if you're looking to personalize it around a donor or draft a particular document around a donor, again, it'll go into ChatGPT, personalize it for you. And now all you have to do is actually, you don't even have to hit the button because Zapier will make the two things happen. So when nonprofits are really wanting to get into this at the most basic level, those two tools alone will help you be able to automate some of those really mundane tasks, and then will allow you to expand your capacity and then expand your reach in a much more efficient and faster way. The danger is that when you create space for your team, the danger is to not then pile on more things in the space that you created. It's to get the work done much more efficiently instead of using that space to cram on more things, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
So how do we take that and create that donor experience for and foster a deeper engagement? So what you just described sounds like sort of, okay, I'm going to engage, but how do we use AI to get a deeper engagement?
Yeah, so I always like to move beyond just like the basic like receipt or thank you letter to really engage around who this person actually is, which a lot of times we could have just done a simple Google search to be able to find that, but a lot of times, we don't. Another tool that we can use around being able to personalize that and to get that engagement really deeper is it's an AI tool called Perplexity. It just takes Google and makes it much more succinct. So you're looking for specific things that donors have given to or donors have been a part of that don't have anything to do with your organization. However, you're pulling that into the correspondence with them to create that sense of goodwill, to say that I see you beyond the $500 that you just gave me. When donors have given like a certain amount and we know they're into softball or they're into football, one of the nonprofits that I worked for, we had those people on our board. So we would be able to say, hey, thank you for this. Because you have given in this way, here's some tickets because we know that you like this. You didn't tell us that, but that's the research that we were able to do and to use AI to be able to personalize that, to make it much more an experience for everyone.
That's great. And then the human element that we talked about, that maybe 20% of the human element would be to come in, make sure that doesn't sound creepy, like
Yes.
you're stalking them, and make it sound very authentic that,
Yes.
you're basically making that connection without sounding like, oh, this is coming from some very thoughtful AI.
Absolutely.
Let's bring it back to targeting and prospecting and kind of getting a better handle on who our best donors would be. So can you talk a little bit about predictive analytics and how that can help identify potential high value donors and giving likelihood and trends in the data? Ashutosh?
The predictive analytics, I think that's how, as we again talk about traditional and modern, I think that's where we saw the largest applications of AI in this space is on predictive analytics and trying to identify, as you asked for us, these next major giving prospects to continue to fill the pipeline. How we do so is, it's not going to be a surprise to anybody, is you look at their previous giving history. You also look at their involvement. You look at, if it's a higher education organization, then you look at their involvement when they were a student, or maybe even after. If we are a membership type of organization, then you try to see what type of activities were they part of. Were they part of some committees? Were they volunteers? So all those attributes that nonprofits usually have access to, if they collected all that data, those are sometimes good indicators where you can separate out major giving donors from non-major giving donors or potential major giving donors. And you can employ lots of different techniques to do so, starting with linear regression, but then advancing it to some machine learning techniques, neural networks, or random forest, or XGBoost, to name a few. But you can squeeze in as much as performance as possible from all the columns and all the information that you have available on your previous donors. But again, as I said, most often you find out that previous giving is the largest indicator of your future giving. So if you are not interested in finding out that you already know these people, then you might suppress that information from your model so that you are actually truly looking at people and trying to find out if their volunteerism actually has an effect on their future giving. So there are a couple of ways also how you can filter that data.
So when you're talking about AI analyzing data, is it simply that AI can do it faster than we can? Or can AI find things that would be really hard for a human to find because the data is so complex?
Predictive analytics helps us not only become faster, but also they used to say there were a couple of expressions, right? Finding diamonds in the rough or finding the needles in the haystack. One of my colleagues likes to say that not only are we going to find more needles, but we are actually going to point you to the haystack where there are most needles. So I think that is the promise of some of these machine learning techniques or some of these predictive analytics techniques is, if you have, again, large donor database or prospect database, then it is going to take you a long time to go through every name and try to figure out from that population who is going to be your next prospect. If it's only 100 people, then you might be able to do that quickly. As Shereese mentioned, do some research. And obviously, you do that anyway when you're in the cultivation stages. You are taking a deeper dive into their interest and their previous histories and donation histories and so on and so forth. But if you have lots of names, then if you were to take a random approach, so let's say you had a phone directory. I don't know who has a phone directory now these days, but say you had a phone directory and you tried calling everybody one by one, it would take you so much time. But what if that directory was pre-populated so that we prioritize the names for you so that you would have a better chance of connecting with that person and perhaps soliciting a gift? So that's what some of these techniques can do for you, is not only save you time in finding those prospects, but also help you prioritize your efforts and resources.
Hi, this is Curtis Schmidt, producer of the Nonprofit Fundraising Exchange. If you're a nonprofit professional who has questions about your program, or maybe you feel like you've taken your advocacy, fundraising, or membership effort as far as you can and you need some fresh ideas, then we have a special offer for you today. NPFX podcast listeners can get a free 30-minute consultation with IPM Advancement, no strings attached, when you go to ipmadvancement.com/free. Just enter a few details and an IPM team member will contact you to follow up. It's that easy. That website again is ipmadvancement.com/free. Thanks for listening, and we hope to talk to you soon. Now let's return to the episode.
Shereese, you talked about ChatGPT and Zapier making things a little bit easier and more automated. In what ways can AI streamline and automate other fundraising processes? Now, and I'm looking at you because you've got this great LinkedIn article with some grant writing tools where you're using AI to make that grant writing process and research process a whole lot easier. And this coming from a guy who hasn't written a grant in his 34 years of nonprofit experience. So tell us about that.
Yeah, grant writing is probably the most requested function or implementation that I get asked to help people use. And we always go back to the bear that everybody knows, which is ChatGPT, because it's easy, and it's free. And it's the thing that if they know about AI, it's the one thing that they know about the most. What is really interesting about ChatGPT, and Ashutosh just kind of talked a bit about this, is how fast things are moving. Because now ChatGPT is really asking you, you can put custom instructions into it. So you can actually, tell it things that it is supposed to consider every single time that you go into it, which wasn't there a couple months ago. So one of the ways when you're talking about using it for grant writing, if you have trained it, as we call it, which just simply means giving it your data, provided that you have it, but all nonprofits have words at least. So giving it what your mission is, giving it your vision, giving it, anything that has been written about you in the voice of the nonprofit, and then taking whatever grant it is that you are writing and putting that information into ChatGPT and making sure that you have the angle that you're writing the grant from. It can do a lot of the heavy lifting. And so you want to make sure, that it understands what it is that you do. And you simply ask it, do you understand, with all of the information that I have given you, do you understand what this mission is and what I am seeking to do? And it will tell you if it understands. It will tell you if it has holes. It will tell you if it doesn't make sense. So now you've got this thing that it's, once it understands, you simply just take the questions and go through it and ask ChatGPT to answer the questions. So that one is the easiest. There are a lot of, at least a number of grant writing tools that are AI powered, but the one that I would often go to or get people to think about is called Grant Boost, BOOST, Grant Boost, because this is a platform that is specifically designed for grant writing. So it's AI with the templates for grant writing. So it knows exactly what it is that you are seeking to do, and it is put it in a format where you don't have to do as much editing. You are going to have to do editing. You have to do more editing with ChatGPT than you will with Grant Boost. And I'll make sure that this list that Rich is talking about, that we have it for the listeners. But grant writing is, once you have trained it to understand what you do, it becomes a much easier function for someone to get on top of, to stay on top of.
There are grant writers across the country right now hurriedly going to these websites.
Let's go back to the fact that you do have to feed data and feed information into many of these AI tools. Let's talk a little bit about some of the ethics behind that, some of the considerations regarding data privacy and security. And I'd like to start with you, Ashutosh. How do you see this kind of, it's an awfully fast rate that we're starting to incorporate these tools into our workflows. How do you make sure that focus on data security and privacy remains intact as we incorporate more and more AI into our workflows?
Yeah, Shereese pointed out a couple of really good use cases that people from any skill set, any resource, strapped even organizations can take benefit of. But that is a conundrum for sure, is how do we know that some of these platforms are not going to use that data to retrain their models? And some of them make it very explicit where you can, I think ChatGPT also has some of these settings where you can turn it off. But if you use ChatGPT 4 or some of these new plugins, there is no way to turn that off or it won't function. So you have to read the terms and services, find the settings. There are alternative options as well. It takes a little bit more doing. There are some open source models as well. So you don't have to use ChatGPT but it may not give you the best performance, but at least if you wanted to build something in-house or host it on your servers, you could do so. Microsoft obviously is integrating OpenAI's their services as part of that. So pretty soon, I mean, they already offer that where you can build it in your own environment. But for somebody who maybe doesn't have all those resources, maybe doing some more research and seeing what options are there available where they feel comfortable that their data won't be used for further training.
Shereese?
Well, when we're talking about data, we definitely want to make sure that we're not feeding anything into it that is sensitive, that is confidential, that can literally come back and possibly bite you on the butt, because as Ashutosh mentioned, we do not know where this information is going. And so when we use it, we have to be aware that we need to use it in a very neutral and benign way, in as much as a generic form as we can. And so when we're talking about being transparent with it, I always come from the point, if you are using it, say if you're using it to write a grant, or you're using it in a sense where you're doing a marketing plan or a development plan or social media or anything like that, it's okay for me, it's okay to use it. I feel ethically okay to use it. If it is something where I am using it, where I am writing an article, I am usually finding myself say that is human and AI generated. So I like to say that it's both, because I did use it, and I feel there is this question that people have about whether or not, if you're going to get the machine to think for you, then you haven't done your part. But those of us who do use it knows that it cannot come out of the machine exactly how it is. And the machine can't generate it if I don't tell you what it is that I want to generate. And so I think when you're talking transparency, if you feel that you need to disclose it, disclose it. And if you don't, in terms of, writing a grant or something, I don't think it's necessary. That's at least the way that I have approached it. But I do recommend that if you're using it, that your data must always be protected, and that you always must approach it from that standpoint.
Yeah, and this is such a new and emerging technology for a lot of nonprofits that it is a good idea to consult your legal counsel, consult the people who help you write your privacy policies, and make sure that AI and however you're using it is being incorporated into those policies, so that if you do have a supporter ask you about it, you're ready with an answer. It's an authentic answer. It's truthful, and you're not trying to kind of say, "Oh, well, we'll get back to you on that."
Mm-hmm.
What about data bias and fairness? Ashutosh, do you have any thoughts on that, and whether or not AI systems can inherit those biases in training data, potentially leading to unfair discriminatory outcomes?
One of my biggest concerns is that all of these models have learned using the internet data that's available for everybody. As I mentioned earlier, on Reddit or some of these other chat forums, they don't use the most positive language. And if, as the expression goes, if winners write all the history, where are the voices of people who have been oppressed for many, many thousands of centuries or millennia? So those voices are already not part of this corpus that's being used to build these models. So that's one issue. Second issue is the language that is part of this corpus. It is pretty toxic. So how do you avoid that? And then on top of that, we have seen all these examples where you ask some of these image generators to polish up how you look for your professional photo shoot. it tries to make it look like someone from the mainstream, or maybe it's using Instagram to learn. That's not who you are. That's not how you see yourself. But the models think that's the mainstream. That's the version that's getting maybe more likes on Instagram. And hence it's going to try to make you look like someone who you are not. So there are some challenges with that. So again, as I said, the knowledge that's not part of this corpus, but the knowledge that is part of this corpus already comes with a lot of bias baked in. So I know some companies have taken great effort to minimize that. They have also, just I think a couple of weeks ago, there was this DEF CON in Vegas where all of these companies had these red teams to try to get some of this information out of these AI models to try to make them say things that were not appropriate or were biased. And there were some of these shocking examples where it did generate some output, which in a job setting could be discriminatory against some people. So there are some of these dangers that we need to watch out for and take every effort that the language is inclusive. It is not intentionally creating any harmful language, but also keeping an eye, what's not part of this? So what's the unknown here?
I also want to add, in terms of bias, at least some things that I have seen in my own way of using it. When you're using a generative AI and you're asking it to act like something, and then it gives you what it thinks that you're asking for. So I noticed that when I have used AI and just completely playing with it and just using it in general, it'll just give me just something, whatever it spits out. But there has been an instance where I have asked it to write the same thing as an African American. And what I got back was something that was full of slang. And so it's like, it's clear that there is bias that's built into it. And as we've talked about these AI pictures that make us look younger or lighter, and they're polishing us up. They're beautiful to look at. But when you're asking about, a professional photograph and you get something back that makes you look, lighter and in 20 years, younger than what you are, that is a certain bias that that it has come from somewhere. And so what I always try to get people to do, and this is why I'm very big on nonprofits training the model as much as they can in the voice and the tone that they would normally use, so that if there is something that comes out of it that has that bias built in, you can spot it like immediately, to be able to do that, and that it's off, and then you're trying to get something as close to yourself as you possibly can.
Ashutosh and Shereese, I want to thank you for your input on data bias. It's very important to hear, and it's very important that we are aware of that. I'm going to take us for a turn again and talk about some specific products as nonprofits that are listening. Are there specific sites that you could lead us to?
Yeah, let's talk about some of the content generation. I like to use Anthropic's Cloud, CLAUDE. I feel it creates more inclusive language. The whole interaction experience is also more pleasing than ChatGPT. But also OpenAI has made some of these things so accessible that you can write your APIs or programs if you wanted to Shereese's point, if you wanted to fine tune or retrain some of those models, so you can do that. If you have resources and if you have the background in programming and some more technical skill sets, Hugging Face is a great resource. There are tons and tons of these models that are available that you can again use. So you don't have to necessarily use only OpenAI. You can use Meta's models as well. And some other tools that I like to use, Stable Diffusion, Midjourney, some of these mainstream tools also.
Great. Shereese, your favorites?
My favorites would be in the content creation space would be something called Vids, VIDDS, and Vidya. And what those will do is take any existing video that you have and chop it up for distribution. Because even though we tell nonprofits all the time they don't have to be on all the social media channels, we know that they are. So those types of AI will chop it up and make it distributable to the other social media channels. And it can create video from text to speak type of video. I'm also going to throw in an oldie but goodie, which is Canva. because Canva has a lot of AI tools that are built into it that will help you create content with that magic write feature and a bulk create feature that will help you create social media content. Then there's one called Nonprofit Operating System. And this one specifically talks about nonprofit storytelling. So it will help you with proposals. It'll help you with thank you notes and email appeals. These have specific templates that you can use, which are a lot easier than ChatGPT. So those are a couple of the ones that I like to use for content creation.
Those are great suggestions. And I also want to remind listeners too that, every day, just the typical apps that you think of not in the AI vein are incorporating AI. We look at Microsoft Word and what Microsoft's been able to do in terms of how they're tracking copy and edits and things like that. And there are, quite a few changes that have come across even in the last 6 to 12 months that people can put to work.
And can I throw in one more?
Of course.
Which is the one from Google, which is Bard. I think it's BARD.
Mm-hmm.
What I find from that one is that it's really good with quantitative data. So if you're doing research around your donors, it's really good for that. And ChatGPT works better with the qualitative stuff. So if you're just at the beginning, really want to do research, it's really great to tap into the AI that is built by the internet that we live on.
And we will have links to all of these sites on this episode. So this one will be clickable, folks. We're going to get to the wrap-up section. This has been an excellent conversation, and I'm sure our listeners have learned a lot about this important topic. It's almost time for us to go, but before we go, we just want to ask a few more questions. Russ, you want to take us there?
Yeah, sure. So I think what we'd like to just wrap up with is let's talk about some of the best practices and some of the takeaways that you'd like people to think about as they get done listening to this episode and really start to think about how they can incorporate AI into their nonprofit fundraising operations. So Shereese, let's start with you. What are some of the best practices that you'd recommend to people?
I would recommend that privacy be the number one paramount above everything else, to really make sure that you are taking your donors' information seriously. And then I would also recommend that you have guardrails in place within the organization. So if you are going to use it within the organization, that you have operating procedures around how AI is going to be used. And again, AI can help you create those operating procedures. And to be ethical around the way that you treat your staff, to not use AI to replace humans, use AI in the gap where a human should be.
Good considerations. Thank you, Shereese. Ashutosh, what do you think?
I would say we should extend some grace to ourselves because the rapid pace is just it's just mind-blowing and mind-boggling. I just saw the Meta's AI chief, Lee Yukeen, I think that's how you say his name, but even he is boggled by how much advancement is happening. They just released their latest open source LLM model, and he commented that, yeah, even I cannot keep up with this pace. So I would extend grace to ourselves, but at the same time, soak in as much as possible so that fits in your schedule, because this will keep moving really fast. And to Russ, your point, some of these things will become part of our everyday tools, Excel, PowerPoint, Word. So no one when you would say that I'm using AI, it will just become that I'm using this tool to get my job done. But I think it will just help us to stay close to the technology and the changes and see, to Shereese's point, how it can help us become more effective, faster, and ultimately meet our objectives of our nonprofits, our missions.
So if listeners could take away one thing, just one thing from this episode, something that we've talked about or even something that hasn't come up yet, what would that be? Shereese?
I would say start. Start today, start now. This thing is moving fast. It's going to be a part of all of our lives very soon. Do not get left behind. Start today, start small, start now.
And Ashutosh?
agree with it. And as much as possible, keep learning about this field and if possible, upskill your skills as well, because it's going to leave us behind if we don't stay with it.
Excellent. And I think the thing that I'd like to take away from this conversation is that, we can't predict the future. Let's just kind of ride this wave as best we can, not get too stressed out about it, and keep trying to move forward with responsibly putting these tools to use for nonprofits.
I'm on vacation right now. What you see is an avatar created by AI.
Very good, Rich. I like it. So we will put many, many links in the show notes for this episode. We have a lot of things to share. And I just want to close out by asking both of our guests, where can listeners learn more about you and how can they get in touch if they'd like to? Shereese, let's start with you.
Yeah, just find me on LinkedIn. That's where I am every day. Keep it simple under Shereese Floyd.
And LinkedIn is also good for me, but I also have a website, my last name.info.
Well, I want to thank you again, Shereese Floyd and Ashutosh Nandeshwar. Thanks also to our producer, Curtis Schmidt. Curtis, you're in a safe space. Admit it. Most of these interview questions were created by AI, right? Come on.
He won't even respond.
He's laughing. He's not going to admit it.
He won't respond.
Russ Faniff, I would take the stars out of the sky for you, my friend.
Oh, wow.
Always a pleasure to see you.
You too, Rich. And thank you so much. What a great conversation on a very important topic. I'm sure it's not the last time we will be discussing AI on the Nonprofit Fundraising Exchange.
For sure. And to you, our listeners, thank you for joining us. We'll see you the next time on the Nonprofit Fundraising Exchange.
That concludes this episode of the Nonprofit Fundraising Exchange. Thanks to our panel for sharing their insights and expertise. If you'd like to learn more about our panel members or any of the organizations or resources featured in this episode, we will include links in the show notes. If you like this podcast, we would love your help spreading the word. First, please subscribe in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or your favorite podcast app so you always know when a new episode is released. Second, forward the episodes you like to friends and colleagues or share them on social media. Word of mouth is one of the best ways you can help us reach more nonprofit professionals like yourself. And if you use Apple Podcasts or Audible, please leave us a review. Positive reviews are how many listeners decide whether or not to try out a new podcast. We appreciate your help. For suggestions on topics, guests, or nonprofit organizations you'd like to hear on the podcast, send an email with the subject heading NPFX suggestion to contact@ipmadvancement.com. For back episodes and more resources like white papers, infographics, and blog articles, please visit the free IPM Advancement Nonprofit Resource Library at ipmadvancement.com/resources. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.